Serious, Redditors who live in very remote areas of the world, like Barrow, Alaska. How is life there? What do you do for fun? I lived in a remote village 50 miles north of the Arctic Circle when I was a kid. There wasn't crap to do because the sun was only up for about 5 hours a day when I was there. So basically a lot of video games and TV. I live on a very remote island in the Indian Ocean where the only way to and from is a bi-weekly 5-hour flight on a relatively small plane. We get one fortnightly freight plane that brings mainly fresh produce, but it's very expensive, like $10 a kilo, and have a container ship come in every 3 months or so and spends 3-4 weeks at sea. Because of this we don't eat a lot of quality fresh fruit, veggies, and all the meat we consume is frozen, with the exception of fresh fish we caught. At the shop you will generally find most products have expired due to long shipping times, etc, etc. We rely on satellite internet so it's slow, and we pay about $150 for 20 GB and about $12 per MB over. Most people who live here are happy-ish with the place. We are funded mostly by a mine who is our biggest employer. When they crash, the whole island will crash, and have a population of about 1,500 right now, but when I first came it was around 900 I believe. It'll say a bit about the old days when I was little and today as a young adult. Young as a kid you would generally go down and just go swimming with mates in the ocean, playing things like jetty chasey, just like normal chazzy but on a jetty. Life was easy and fun. No crime and no risk of kidnappers, so parents would happily just let a 8-year-old run off all around town provided they come home by dinner. That's about it really. Nowadays as a young adult, fishing is your biggest time killer. I love my spearfishing and will probably spend 18 hours a week just in the water spearing. It's a tropical island so swimming is great all year round. Besides that, alcohol is very cheap so many young people spend their time drinking. If you're not drinking or fishing you're probably binge watching or out kicking a footy. Many young people go off to uni and don't return except for holidays visiting parents, the ones who stay behind work full time. I might add something that I am really not proud of. There is a level of boredom obviously, and because of this there is a big drug problem. Many people use ice, which is a massive shame, and I'm actually curious if many other people in small isolated communities share the same issue. I think the general consensus is small towns have problems with drugs and alcohol. I live in a roadless village of 50 in southeast Alaska. It is accessible by boat or seaplane. We get together on the beach or at the dock and have fire, food, and drink. We play music. We hike around picking mushrooms and berries. We fish and hang out at a lake. We have potlucks and birthday parties. We have dinner parties where everyone brings something they have grown, foraged, fished, or hunted. Good times. I live on a small island in SE, Alaska with a population of about 1,000 people. It is a Native American reservation. The main business is fishing. They have a grocery store, mini-mart, high school, middle school, and elementary school. There is not a movie theater nor a store, but they have a small casino that only has slots. What do I do? Go for walks with my dog, go to their gym, they have a nice pool, and work. Besides that, watch TV and surf the web. It can be pretty boring, especially when it rains for weeks. But you can always take the ferry and shop at the world's smallest Walmart. I live in a town of 330 people. 5 streets. There's a convenience store which is also the restaurant, post office, movie rental place, and pretty much everything else. Aside from that there is a bar. It's quiet, but it's nice. Everyone knows everyone. Anyone will do anything for you. Heck, half the people don't even lock their doors. I lived in a remote part of Greenland for the better part of a year. It was actually one of the major cities in the country, with about 2,000 citizens. Internet costed about $200 for 5 GB, because it was satellite connection. I mostly just worked, watched some television, and a few times we went to this extremely expensive restaurant. It is a very depressing area, especially for teenagers and young adults, because in many ways they had no ability to get out of there. One winter in Dutch Harbor my friend had a whole bunch of empty gas bottles of various sizes. So over the course of about a week we took them by snowmobile up on a mountain and hung them on chains from a steel frame we erected. When all was ready, we let them swing free and took off. It's very windy in Dutch and they became a wind chime. People in town were like, WTF is that awful cacophony? Took a few weeks before they got it together and took it down. I have a vacation home in northern Pakistan in the Himalayas. Life is very quiet and bucolic there. It's a wonderful place if you like mountains, forests, lakes, and rivers. However, the access is difficult, either by mule or a sturdy 4x4 like a Land Cruiser. As for leisure, I ride my bicycle, stargaze with my telescope, go fishing, paint, play my oud violin, watch movies, and of course I read. For many people it sounds boring and isolated, but it's very refreshing because I think we all need time to ourselves now and then. It helps the internet speeds are so slow via satellite, so other than email or the news twice a day, you hardly use it. Plus 33 points for bucolic. I lived in Punaluu, Oahu, Hawaii for a while growing up. A good day was getting up at 4 AM to walk miles up the beach with my little sis, looking for Japanese glass floats. I found quite a few. I might go surfing later in the midday and pick some nihao shells, kahalelani, or path of heaven, to sell to a local shop. Once I'd strung them into strands, or fish for smelt by running through the school or them by the river stream, getting 2-3 per run. Those things were great. Fry 'em up and kiss 'em off the bones. Or I'd fish for other fish, moonlight annies or a lot of Hinalia lawilly, wrasse that looks like a willy leaf, because at the time I didn't know any better. They are a good beginner fish. We didn't have a phone most of the time. I sold coral heads I'd picked and bleached out to tourists. I might make 50 a day doing that. We didn't have mail, in that I could not afford stamps. I helped my mom clean hotels rooms, ostensibly for $1 a room, but that never happened. But I did it anyway because if I was quick, I got a shot at any leftovers in the mini fridge. I felt bad for doing such lowly work, then learned the other kids in school were jealous because I had work. I last visited there in 03. It really is remote. Your life on the island sounds like the first act of an RPG. I live in Anchorage, but have been north off the road system a few times, like Nome. One thing about living far off the road system is the fact that large junk is hard to haul out. Vehicles are abandoned in the tundra, rusting away. Tons of old iron out there. Some homes are derelict, but demo is too expensive. Can make for some interesting sights around the area. I live up in Alaska and we don't have a lot of things. It's not a hip, modern, fashionable city by any means, but I still love it. A lot of my free time is spent outside skiing, fishing, hiking, and road tripping this massive plain of wildlife. It never gets old. I am genuinely happy here. The air is the cleanest I've ever breathed, and having grown up in Fairbanks and later Anchorage, I can't stand city smog or damp weather. This is definitely not the place for those who dislike the outdoors. Heck, this entire state is a playground for those who can't stand being indoors in the first place. I lived in a fly-in reservation in Ontario, Canada with a population of about 15 people. I wasn't friends with any of the people, so I spent a lot of time playing video games, producing music, mostly hip hop, and watching entire TV series. It was really depressing. I grew up in a town called Yellowknife, NWT in Canada. There was about 20,000 people in this city, but the nearest largest city was over 10 hours away. The city basically made up for 2/3 of the NWT Nunavut population. The winters hit up to -50, so there was a lot to get used to there. It was dry though, so not too horrible. The summers were dry as well, but could get up to about 30 C. The winters were very short days. I would go to school in the dark and leave at 4 PM and it would be dark. That being said, the summers were amazing. Sunny 24 hours a day. You'd have to sleep with your blinds closed. It could be a little disorienting. The northern lights were also gorgeous. It's a real rare treat up there. In terms of what to do, there was literally nothing to do as a growing teenager. We spent a lot of summer outside, walking and drinking in the sun at 2 AM or just spending time at someone's house. In the winter it's a lot of fun going snowmobiling, because basically no matter what direction you go, 10 minutes you are in the middle of forest with no signs of humans around you. Since we are so far away from civilization, everything was extremely expensive compared to Edmonton, which is the nearest big city 16-18 hour drive away. Gas, groceries, anything you could think of was at least 30% more expensive since it needed to driven up, especially in the winter before we had a bridge. There was a ferry. When the winter, there would be a point in time where the ferry couldn't get through the ice, and the ice road wasn't open yet. There was basically no way to get to or from Yellowknife without flying, so the prices shot up. Would live there again 10/10. Would never want to grow up in a place like that again though. Mind you, there are a lot of opportunities for children that they won't get to do in a big city, like travel for sports and scholarships and such. Out of the office, finally a question I can answer. I didn't live in Barrow, but I lived and worked in Point Hope, Alaska for about a year. It's pretty close to Barrow and is actually smaller. I believe there was less than 600 people living there at the time. The biggest thing in small native villages like this is basketball. Almost all the young kids and adults will participate to some degree. It's the town sport. The women's team was better than the men's team during the year I stayed there. 2013 to 2014. There's game nights or events set up at the school sometimes. Nothing really special though, since you can't gamble there. Bingo is pretty big among the older crowds. There is actually quite a bit of a struggle to find things to do, unfortunately. A lot of the kids will get into trouble out of boredom. Alcohol is banned there, however it is a bit of an issue. People get drunk and rowdy. A good portion of the village smokes quite a bit of weed. It's ridiculously expensive though. $40 a gram and $100 for a bag, which is an eighth. A lot of the younger kids really look forward to trips outside of Point Hope, like going to Kotzebue or Anchorage. You'll be surprised how in touch they are with American pop culture. A small number of them hunt for sport and for food, but there's definitely some instances of pointless killing. Look up the Carabao incident. There's honestly not much to do, to be completely honest. You can play basketball, smoke weed, get drunk, go hunting, or just stay home and play video games. If you do play video games, you're not going to be playing online much. It's just crappy satellite internet. It's practically dial-up. A time of the year I really did enjoy was the Whaling Festival. I didn't really enjoy the food like muktuk, but I did enjoy the gathering of nearby villages and the general vibe of the whole thing. Everyone is so nice and friendly, it can be a fun time. Quite interesting. Overall, Point Hope can be an interesting place to visit if you weren't stuck working the whole time like I was. But with that said, I wouldn't advise prolonged visits. There's really not all that much to do unless you really love the outdoors. But even then, you'll need to trek out quite a bit to reach the mountains. Quite odd seeing Barrow, Alaska, haha. I was born and raised here. I do not go hunting like most of my family members do. I mostly stay at home and play video games, although the internet really sucks for online gameplay. I normally ping at about 800 latency while trying to play FF14. Oh right, on the hunting part, Barrow just caught their quota for whaling this weekend. My Facebook feed was pretty much all whaling and cutting up whales pictures. Never lived there, but I've spent a lot of time visiting a small town with a population of about 300 in middle of nowhere TX. The lack of access is actually really nice. It allows for really relaxed interaction and an extremely laid-back mentality in general. You can do a bunch of stuff that you couldn't really do in a larger or more densely populated area, like shoot guns wherever for fun, make huge bonfires at night, and make as much noise as you want without any neighbors to complain. Whenever I'm there, I always go fishing a lot and ride around on ATVs, dirt bikes. Also gave me a new appreciation for rednecks. The common perception is that they're these uneducated hillbillies, but it's really just a relaxed, hard-working way of life. Some of the best nights I've had have just been driving out into the pasture with a bunch of family and friends, knocking back beers, breaking out the acoustic to play country songs, and shooting the crap while shooting crap. Seriously, I know it might sound weird to people living in a city, but shooting bottles skeet is so much fun. I don't know if I could live there full time, but it's definitely a really fun and relaxing environment. There's also a lot of crazies that go out there to make and crap, so you do kind of have to keep an eye out for that. One of my family's neighbors was actually the subject of a sting where they brought in a helicopter and like a coalition of police from surrounding counties to bust them. Other than that though, it's great, lol. Back in vanilla WoW, we had a girl in our guild that lived in a far off part of Alaska like Barrow. Most people got around by boat, not car or truck. I remember one night we were in Blackwing Lair and in TeamSpeak there's a muffled crash. She excuses herself for a couple minutes and you hear yelling in the background and a gunshot. She comes back, apologizes, and explains that a bear was trying to get into her house. It was wild. I live in AK. Not a remote part, but have spent a lot of time in the remoter places. It's kind of nice to get away from it all and spend time hiking, fishing, camping, etc. But I definitely always enjoy returning to the city. The people that live in those places year round tend to be either incredibly active outdoorsy folk, or stay inside and drink a lot. Someone else said something about bonfires, and that is a huge activity up here. One winter, we had one every week even when it was below zero. It's pretty awesome, but you tend to drink a lot more so you don't feel the cold. The places I go are mostly fishing villages, and so the locals tend to make their living as fishermen or running tourist businesses. One of the weirdest places I've ever been is Witter, AK. It's not incredibly remote, as it is accessible by highway, but you have to drive through a 2.5-mile tunnel, longest in America, and it's incredibly unnerving thinking about the heavy mountain above the tunnel you're driving through. Not to mention it is one way and the road is not very wide. The town itself is absolutely gorgeous, but only populated by a couple hundred people. It's a pretty poor place with not many businesses, but is really interesting to drive through. There is a massive building called the Buckner Building, which was a World War II barracks where 1,000 people used to live, with all sorts of amenities like bowling alleys and restaurants. Now it is just a fenced off massive concrete structure that no one is allowed into, and it looks like an old insane asylum in a movie. Lots of people broke in there to explore for a while, but it wasn't accessible when I tried to go. There is a new super nice building in which all of the town's residents live. All in all, it's a creepy place, but with some of the most gorgeous scenery and excellent fishing. No clue what locals do there, but I imagine drink. I went to the one restaurant that was open during the winter and there was just a bunch of people hanging out, so I guess that's where they socialize. I lived in a remote village in the country of Georgia for several months last year while teaching English. It has maybe a couple hundred people living there, and the only road there is a rundown dirt road that really isn't a road at some points, just a pike of jagged rocks. It's only 20 minutes to the nearest town of substance, but only like 5 people have a car, so you must take the once daily Marshrutka large van. It's a real nice place scenery wise, right at the base of mountains and such. With no one there, it's real calm and peaceful, real quiet at all hours, and everyone knows everyone and is real nice to you. The few who have cars offer rides to those walking, do example. However, there is nothing there. It's got one shop that's barely got anything aside from some beer and crackers, a rundown school, and nothing else. Most everyone there has some farmland they work on all day, but the people are really poor. The family I stayed with didn't even have an indoor toilet, and the power would go out at least once a day for hours on end, and the water shutting off wasn't uncommon either. Speaking of the water, it was only cold. If you wanted hot, you booked some, and that went for showering. You'd light a wood stock and wait about 2 hours for enough water to heat up. This accounts for most people only bathing about once a week and doing laundry sparingly, leaving clothes outside to dry in all types of weather. Internet was not a thing up there, nor was radio, but TV worked at least. For fun, you'd mostly work on farm stuff. They got about 40 newborn chickens while I was there, so that was fun dealing with them. Watch TV, or nothing much else. Drinking wine is also a big thing. Every family makes strong homemade wine. It was an experience to say the least. There were good days that were real fun, and days when I couldn't wait to get out of the place. But overall I liked it enough to go back and visit. I'm not entirely sure if this counts or not, but I live in a pretty rural area of the Midwest. It's not extremely isolated, but the county has literally no stoplights and only a few small towns, and it's still pretty far away from most things. For fun, we have television as always, and there are a lot of community events. We have 4-H, there's some church stuff, potlucks, libraries, and a theater. Basically a lot of small town fun stuff. Pretty much everyone you don't know is your mutual friend. There's broadband internet, but the best you can get is about 2 Mbps, so you usually have to wait a little while before you can watch something in 720p, and online gaming is frustrating too. Overall, I'd say that it's a strong sense of community, combined with a sometimes sad and frustrating sense of being out there and your area isn't really recognized in anything. If 2 megabits per second constitutes a remote area, I must fricking live on Mars. I work up on the North Slope quite a bit. There isn't much to do other than eat, work, and gossip. You can still use your phone in some places and people bring up all sorts of crap like TVs and video game systems. Atkasuk in northern Alaska is another remote native village I visit sometimes. My friend's house was built by them with help from friends. They still have Wi-Fi. It's just super expensive. But heck, I pay over $200 a month in Anchorage for good Wi-Fi with a cap on it, lol. In the village we go ice fishing in winter and snow machining. In summer there is all sorts of fun outdoors stuff to do. I like to go to the dump and watch bears look for food in a lot of the places I stay in. My company trucks in supplies all winter to the villages on the north slope and gets them supplies and stuff they need. I live at the South Pole. 45 people for 9 months out of the year. I'm only here for 12 months, but it's pretty much as remote as you can get. It's easier to get to the ISS than to the South Pole for the majority of the year. Okay, since there's not a single story of anyone that actually lives in the Arctic Circle of Alaska, I'll give you some insight. I work on the north slope of Alaska, Prudhoe Bay. The locals in the villages nearby live very simple lives. Because of the oil companies leasing their lands to drill here, they are pretty well off. It's not uncommon at all for them to have new snow machines or trucks every year. It actually has ruined their way of life having this much money thrown at them. Alcohol is such a problem. Kids will generally just smoke weed or drink alcohol and just hang out around town. When you live in a town that is a square mile in total area and the nearest town is 60 miles away, you generally get bored. They try to help the kids, but because of all the money they all grow up with their parents having extreme alcoholism or drug addiction. I'd say maybe 1/15 kids that come from the villages here come out clean enough to have a life outside of the village. You have been visited by a normal duck. He doesn't do much, but he'd like you to like the video. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.